Hello SGD. I posted a compilation video just with a soundtrack a few months ago, maybe a year ago, and just old stonemason and quarry photos. So we begin in the quarry, and we'll see some really big pit quarries, but for the most part, quarries in the ancient world, Inca and other parts, weren't digging pits. They were taking advantage of natural outcrops or rockfall quarries, especially places like Olden, Tambo. So again, nature has done the work for you. There are boulders laying around that are just waiting to be cut into blocks rather than you extracting them from the ground. And even, I'm guessing this would be a sandstone or limestone quarry, but notice the strata as well. So the thickness of the walls or of the blocks is defined by, well, what nature's done for you. And so look at more examples. So it's a sandstone quarry, but the same thing. So, you know where the local quarry is, you know the thickness of these seams, bedding planes, and so take advantage of that to make that the thickness of your walls rather than go to all that extra work to get them to another thickness or height. Now, more when people think of quarries, more like a traditional pit quarry or traditional standard as we think of them now. In the quarry, I'll show you again later. Now we have a lot of these lines running around. By the age of photography, pneumatic tools, wire rope cutters, because with steam engines and so forth, had come in and started to change the landscape. But you'll see lots of pictures of just traditional hand tools as well. But I like this one because they're going to take this big slab out, knock it over, big block, and how they set up these stones underneath as cushions. Again, to stop the big block snapping. Same thing here. Now they're using old wagon winches. Again, plenty of videos where you can see wooden levers would achieve the same thing. Just you cut the block, and then especially granite loves to snap. It's obedient in that way, and again they've just set up this cushion on the bottom to stop it hitting the floor and then potentially putting a big crack in the block. Same thing here, and now I'm guessing that they've got a sandstone or something there underneath as well, but again just a vertical cut, and then with a bit of pressure. Most stones are like this as well, that they'll snap along the line. So you see we've done the vertical cut and snap. Now they might have later on come with a wire rope saw and cut along the base, or use one of these other larger hand saws, but yeah, granite tees especially just loves to snap along the line. This block was knocked off, maybe it cracked when it was tipped over. There seems to be wedges in here as well, so that crack looks like an accidental one, but this line is too straight. So yeah, they've started now drawing out the lines using a square, and even notice the saw that they've got in there as well. More photos of saws coming. Yeah, just an old quarry. Now these, almost certain this is a wire rope saw, because they could attach these lines to other machines to run the machine, just like you can attach a tractor to all sorts of different equipment. But usually now you can bring them around on a cart or a wheelbarrow. You've got the generator or the engine to turn the wire rope saw. Back in these old photos, you see how they'd have a machine room somewhere on the quarry and then run long cables over and then use those to run the machines. I'll show you some more of those. Yeah, nice old quarry. Again, these pneumatic lines or wire rope, probably pneumatic lines. Giant block of stone. I think this is a photo. This was the largest single piece of granite ever quarried. Not quarried as a block and moved, but the single piece without a crack in it. And a piece of this would be highly prized, especially if you're doing a big, like a state capitol, one of those buildings, where you want all the stone to be of the same colour and consistency. Because with those cracks or seams or sort of discolorations running through it, a big block like this would be highly prized. Break it up and then make a lovely building out of it. And just the old school quarry, a lot of guys doing labour. Now you see the big quarries is a handful of guys operating big machines, more people in the office, and machine rooms and in the safety department than what there are actual people working on the quarry face itself. Family businesses. Old fellas are like these, you'll see how they tend to be, at work they're better dressed than what most people are when they go to a formal function these days. Nice old quarry, so, and also quarries like this, where especially for locals, you don't have a big outcrop of stone or a rockfall quarry ready to access, but you do have bedrock just beneath the soil, so you dig out a trench, quarry up, and then fill in again, or use it as a pond or a cistern, whatever, for the village. There seem to be the wire rope lines or maybe haulage lines, so again you'd have a steam engine up there in the top of a quarry, or off to the side, run the line and attach that to the crane. So if you've probably seen those logging shows when on the side of a mountain they've got the drag line, again, nice one with the seams running through, so a lot of your work's done for you in these type of quarries already. Splitting a big giant granite block, old days work safety, guys standing there out on the edge doing the business, and just a few guys standing on the plank to keep him safe behind. No high vis. Giant quarry pit. Big blocks in granite, and notice all the timber work around it. Even though iron was available at those times, it was still quite expensive, and timber works fine, especially if you've got a forest next door. Just send some fellas out, cut down some logs, give them a little bit of time to dry out, and away you go. Again, logs, forest in the background, giant single piece there, and it's separated so it looks like it's been levered up out of that pit. Here comes the rain. Nice old quarry, again pretty, it looks science fiction-y. Pretty sure this one's granite as well, and notice that I've posted a bunch of them, you might have seen them around where people split the granite block, and then you'll say, but that's just splitting the stone, you can't create a block. Well, yes you can, I've shown examples of that as well, but to do the vertical split and you run horizontal, you can do these simultaneously. And just again the nature of the stone, especially because they understood how it works, just like a carpenter understands the grains of timber and so forth. These experienced people could, in a very short time, so they drill the holes, put in the wedges, split them out, and make nice big blocks that just need a little bit of dressing after that. So not just pit quarries, but also chasing this seam. You might have a really nice seam of beautiful high quality marble, so you're chasing the seam underground, just like miners would chase a gold seam or a coal seam. This one later, I've got a better one as well, but yeah, old pits and cavern quarries. Cool old sites, cutting in underground. I'll come back to this later, but how they extracted these type of stones by using hand saws. So you're going after the stone. It's a different site, but the same thing's happening. Giant underground caverns, quarries that again looks like they do it CGI these days, but that was real life back in the day. Stairway down to the bowels of the earth. I'm not sure where this might, but the Tura limestone quarry in Egypt, where they got the casing stones. I'm not saying that that giant cavern was from ancient times, but there's some lovely pictures in that Tura limestone quarry as well. These are modern, obviously coloured pictures with the machinery, but you can see these go back in quite some time. Crazy stuff, beautiful, again CGI almost now, but real life. Very cool. Sorry about the storms just come in. Look at that stairway. That's something, alright. Yeah, that's Vermont. This is like a Harry Potter movie with these big supports that they've left in the stone to stop this rock face collapsing in on the rest of the quarry. Granite quarries. Yeah, that's the one. Sorry, so you got the one view inside, but that's what it looks like as well. Just brilliant, amazing stuff. Used to be big business, but not so much. Now we still do a lot of quarrying, but we tend to quarry limestone to crush it up to make cement. So we're not using big limestone blocks anymore, but we're so you might hear, but it will take this, this long to move that much limestone, and therefore the pyramids. The amount of limestone that we're moving now to put into cement manufacturing is mountains above what that other. So if you hear that, we couldn't do it, it's just a nonsense. It's just we don't quarry like this for stone anymore because we just don't build with stone. We make masonry blocks. Glass and steel and bricks is what the way we tend to do it now. Big large stone pieces and walls. Barely ever. Most stonework now is granite bench tops, coffee tables, big sheets of stone, thin sheets to put on the walls, but not so very often stone construction. Not like the old days anyway. Nothing like that. Just again, these are coloured modern pictures, but just showing the scale of quarrying. It's in California, so yeah, where you find these nice bits of stone sitting there waiting to be quarried, you go there. You don't need to. You want to avoid digging down big pits or just much less work. Yeah, the amount of actual labour, not employees, but people labouring on these old quarries. The scale of the business. You go back to these times. Especially late 1800s, early 1900s, where I was still making stone buildings. I did a series on US state capitals. Are fascinating. The amount of beautiful work that's done in that time, and sort of predating, the modern tools and the equipment, which really only took off after World War II. They were available before, but not in white. They were just too expensive in comparison to the labour costs. So again, distribution and the size of the stone industry as it used to be for moving blocks and construction. That's again Georgia granite, and you can see when they split the stone, and you get really nice faces. So these stones weren't cut out with a saw, but split and then maybe finely dressed. Picks, hammers and chisels, handwork. Here's an old Roman era. Just showing all the tools that the masons, this is the mason's kit that we still have now, so like picks and the handle, levels with a plumb line to get you for level, again plumb line, trowels, wedges, chisels, all those type of things. Nothing's really changed. Old Roman centurion, they were engineers as what they was, much soldiers. And this is from the 1400s. We see a pump drill. Again, the level, on the level, compass, square, pick, straight edge. Tools have barely changed, if at all. And just the nature of the work. So when you, even with modern carbide tools, it's tap, 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 tap. I was showing the videos of the actual masons doing it. I still love it. Just recently I got this, I'm a mason, you can't do this. That's how they did it in the past, and they didn't do it with carbide tip or diamond tools. Now, there are plenty of examples, but you can see a fellow like this could get this tool and his mallet, and he could split this block up very, very quickly. But it's that fine dressing work and the carving and the sculpture and all of it, like the engraving that they do is tap, 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 very gentle, very slow, very patient work. And before the Iron Age, if you were using flint tools, it's exactly the same process. You'd use more modern tools because it requires less maintenance. Also a cool feature you'll see later is these stools that they use. They use a one-legged stool, and I'm almost certain of it. It's because you're able to lean forward and backwards and side to side and adjust your position instead of like having to move the chair. Just a normal type of stool. This one allows you, just to get that right angle and in your work, and all little tips of simple little improvements. That's how the ancients and our recent ancestors who didn't have advantage of all the modern machinery and computers and stuff that we have now, but they turned a very, very difficult job into just a difficult job, because every little advantage you can get, you give to yourself. We lost it a little bit, just picks and chisels, working away. Again, I'm sure these guys dressed up for the occasion, but again, it's nice you see all those old fellas in the quarries there, how well dressed they were at work. These guys are wearing clogs, so I guess where they're from, but this is, now I forget the name of it, so it's basically a chisel. It's not a hammer, it's a chisel on the end of a handle, and especially along the edges of stone, so you hold it near the edge, give it a whack, and it takes off big chunks of granite as well. You see these masters who had all this, generations of knowledge behind them, how much stone they can move by hand and hand tools. I showed a video just recently about Japanese stonemasons rebuilding an ancient wall, and this is a type of tool they were using as well. And also, so when you're splitting the blocks, I'll show you a bit more plug and feather, but you drill a series of holes, and with a wedge or with a plug and feather, you split the block in no time at all, and you're left with a really nice surface. And then, someone has to come in and dress it. So to make a really nice flat, a nice presentable block, it's not a lot of work. It's hard work, but you're just removing a little, a centimetre, half an inch off the top to get the nice dressed stone. And this is just the way it was done on a big scale. Claw marks. This is quarrying, ancient quarries. So you often, maybe you fall into that part of the internet where it's ancient claw marks, unexplainable. These are just pick marks, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Whether they're straight lines or curved lines, if you're using a pick, you chisel out these channels, you have a gap between, and then once the channel is deep enough, you can just knock out that middle piece. So instead of having to remove all of a stone with the tool, it's just it's standard time-saving tool. You'll see it in more modern quarries, and you'll find it in ancient quarries as well, because it's only a mystery among certain circles. So again, those claw marks, chisel marks, you can see the felt. So it tends to be, if you're using a chisel like that, you're going to go in more of a straight line. But when you're swinging pick, because the pick moves in a circular, you're going to get more of these arched types of lines. And a cool thing I saw was a stone, like a specialist there at the Parthenon. He could go to different stones and he'd see the tool marks, and he could identify different stonemasons by their signature of their work. So, for instance, this guy, the supervisor in there wouldn't even need to ask who did this stone, because he'd see the peculiar pattern that this guy has and know, that was Ted, that was John, that was Steve. Cultural Revolution, they sent all the youngies out in the countryside to do the work, and not trained stonemasons, just labour force out. And how did they do it? Exactly the same method. Claw marks not a problem. Ancient and modern quarries. Okay, now drilling. So if you want to split the stone, and you want to split a stone right, you have to drill to a certain depth, to a deep depth, if you want to make a really nice big split. So you can go to a short distance, but the deeper you go, the more accurate, nicer it's going to be the cut. But even if it's only a short one, how did they used to do it? It was called start drilling by hand. So basically a guy holds a metal bar, long chisel, guys bang on the top, take turns, he rotates it each time, and they could drill 40 to 50 feet of drill hole in a day in granite as well. The same thing's going on here. Bang, bang, bang. You work in, you sync up your work, and you're drilling lots of stuff. These are some examples of star drills. We've got a better close-up. They call it a star drill because it looks like a star at the end, but you can also use a standard like chisel, sort of sharpened chip point, and that's how they used to drill before pneumatic drills and these other methods. This one's crazy because you're seeing he has to drill up at a certain angle, and so he's swinging underhand, and these guys are doing the same, especially in mining. Then you might, especially with the invention of dynamite, you drill a deep hole, you put the dynamite in, bang. And so especially for all the old tunnels and stuff. How did the Egyptians do it? Well, the stonemasons drill. The actual tool which they show themselves using is also the hieroglyph for it. There's another example. So I use these, again, they show themselves using it in vase manufacture. It's not just the bow drill, it's also used in stone. Lots of examples of that. Splitting stone. I now forget the couple who wrote. They were examining in America the stone splitting history and where you could see, but it's basically either you use a wedge or you use plug and feather or feather and wedge. So this is if you went to Aswan Quarry, you would see exactly the same marks in there as well, where that's just to insert a wedge. You can use metal or you could use wood as well. And these are examples of those tools. So you have a standard wedge, stone wedge, figure 1, or plug and feather, which is a wedge, but then you have these feathers or shims, and exactly the same process, but the plug and feather is a little bit safer. And there you see the tool in use and splitting the stone. Again, I've shown in video examples when the people are really good at it and the things that they can do with it. But even an absolute newbie, there's a lot of YouTube videos where people just splitting these big blocks in no time. And here we see examples of that. Again, they can take it, so not just about vertical, but they can do horizontal on the X and Y and Z axis all at once, and they can split, and did split big, beautiful blocks in like no time at all. This looks like they're actually using wood wedges down here as well, but they're splitting this big stone. Levering as well. Now you're going to be using iron steel levers, because you can have a sharp edge and get into a tiny crack. Again, I've shown people when they get wooden levers, you'd have to open up the stone a little bit more, but a wooden lever works just the same, but you'd have to open up a little bit, because it's a sharp-ended wooden lever is just going to snap at the end. You need a bit of meat on the wood to get the leverage going. Yeah, just stone splitting. Stone splitting is even to make a giant relief sculpture in Stone Mountain. Whether this, if it's a natural crack as well, so you can split it in the normal feather and wedge way, and if there's a natural crack there, well, you just take advantage of that too. There's a slight variation where they've got wedges and they've just put some metal bar in the side there, just again to help it so that the wedges fit the gap. They're a little bit too slim, so just add a little bit of meat and then works fine. Just the standard way. It's not a esoteric topic just done by a few masons, and this is there's countless of ways it's done. Feather and wedge. Old timers. Did I show that one? Yep. So again, take and make big, nice, lovely blocks all in one go. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, so you've got to drill a hole. For those old railway tunnels when I was setting up the railways, expanding out west in the US, and dynamite and nitro had come in. They drill the hole, fill it up with explosives, and bang. I think this might be an example of it. That sort of looks like powder marks, where this has been split, one hole, bit of dynamite, and off you go. Examples of sawing stone. So these are not planks of wood. These again, the old fella sitting there. There's another example of it later. He's got an adjustable chair, and he's like set up these planks to walk on, place his feet on, But there's this, yeah, so as he's cutting down, then he would shift the chair down a little bit, shift the chair down a little bit, so he's always on, yeah, efficiency. Here's the same sort of tool, but unlike this fella who's just doing it and holding it up straight himself, you'll see other examples of this. They've got these, set up these wood poles, they've got a bit of rope underneath, and so now it's not just a drag saw, it's more of a swing saw, so the saw is going to swing. And old timers, old fella on the stone saw. Patience is indeed a virtue, and it was hard work and work to innovators. You have to, but just normal work. So see example, that's the same type of chair, adjustable as he's going down. I think it's called a Bermuda saw. So in limestone, or most limestone, some limestone is really, really tough, but standard hand tools for cutting. I posted a video a while back about these Aussie fellas, and they're still cutting it just with a big, looks like a timber saw, but do it by hand. And you have these other types of saws. We'll see more of these in a moment. Here's like a big swing saw. So again, that's that frame. It swings back and forth. They've already cut down some depth, so you just every once in a while you adjust the height. Now they've also got ropes with counterweights on there to help adjust the height of the saw. There's a better example in a moment. This is a sandstone quarry. It's hard to make out, but again, he's using these frame saws down in the base. So you can see a little bit better how it works. You've got the frame, ropes are tied off to keep it upright, and so the operator doesn't have to manipulate the weight all the time. And you have these counterweights there to help with that thing as well. Sticks and strings, our ancestors were pretty clever people. Here's another version of a frame saw, like a big long post, and it's hanging off there. Because it's swinging, it's also going to create a different arc, the way that it cuts the stone. And I'll show you, there's some nice ones of these. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, the particulars of it. This one seems to have been worn down quite a bit, so I'll show you what I mean in a moment. But the sort of teeth were pre-cut in there. Yeah, so as the teeth get worn down, we sort of have the next section, and you can sort of just cut those bits away, and you've got the much less work to maintain the tool. Hand saws in quarries, and these big chunky ones as well. So again, I'm thinking these are marble quarry, but exactly the same process with granite, but you wouldn't have the teeth on there, you're just using the abrasive. But yeah, cutting stone, it is feasible. So again, if you've heard, I can't be done, and it'd take too long, well, tell that to your great grandfather, because they did that for a career. He's in that pit again. These big saw there, guys operating the big saw, sawing stone. You see other examples of it now. Again, these ones as well. I'm sure they're adding the grit or the abrasive in there. He's cutting in that direction, and so they didn't even need. Didn't need the edge of the stone, so they start just scraping across the top and cut out the groove. And for instance, look at this. They use them vertically, so it's they did and could do the cuts. They're working in tight spaces, so it's not just the work itself. The old coal miners, the old work. This is how they put up with it. Intolerable, we couldn't take it these days, but for them it was normal. Workplace safety, none of these issues for them. There's another example of one of those saws, where the sort of teeth are almost pre-made, so once they get worn down, you just go to the next set, almost like shark teeth. Cutting big blocks, if you've got that frame saw, the frame's going to get away at a certain depth, so once you get down too deep for the top of the frame, well, then you'd have to use one of these type of Bermuda saws. Yeah, Bermuda. as time progressed and the industrial revolution come along, so you'd have a machine room where the steam engine, whatever the power source is, and then you run these cables off and you're using wire, and wire rope become economic, widely available. So these are the wire rope cutters have come in, but we do get those photos where they, even after wire rope cutting, people were still doing things by hand, stone sawing, and there's probably some parts where they still might be doing it now. But yeah, you see the machine shop, you couldn't just move your motor around, they were pretty big and heavy, and so you run lines out either to power the wire rope saw, or you might put them and attach them to another tool machine. Again, handwork, and then the world changed and we've got these powered machines which aren't that much faster either. It's just more economic. And cutting granite blocks with steel blades, I did a whole sort of video and experiments cutting it with copper. No difference between copper and steel and cutting granite either. And then, yeah, giant circular saws become available and have changed things again. So wire rope saws are really fast compared to drag saws, and moving and lifting. So again, you see the big lever and the guys standing on the side to really put the force into, and you can just from the part you can see this is no small block that they're levering. Give me a lever, yeah, you can do so much. They've built a ramp and they're bringing it up onto the wagon, and to get that last stage, well, guys with levers. It's the most primitive ancient machine, but a super powerful one. And you have capstans, so a bit like this horse. We've seen the sailors back in the day, they would all walk around in a circle, and what the capstan is, which is the same thing here, it's a gearbox. It's a big circle turning a small circle, which gives you mechanical advantage. And then industrial revolution, these masons winches as they call them, brought them along. If you look up the Mussolini's monolith, they're moving the stone 300 tonne, and you see just a couple people on a mason's winch or a more primitive capstan moving that, just with very ancient knowledge. But it's just chains come in before they would use hemp rope. Chain is even better, and then this primitive capstan, well, now got replaced by wire ropes or steel chain, and yeah, just better tools. So how are they dragging these things up? Again, notice the angle of a ramp. Graham Hancock's Lost High Technology facts are just ridiculous. It's on a sled, pull it up, low friction, and whether it's motorised or whether it's powered by animal or by labour, just put a capstan on the end and you can move mountains. Even just the skill of making this ramp, you can't just, even it's things as simple as piling stone, there's a difference between an amateur and a guy, professional who's been doing it for a long time. Here we see like Olden, I notice a fella, he's walking on a hamster wheel. So that horse was walking around in a circle in a gearbox. Now this is a gearbox as well. Rope gets wound around the axle, which is much less in circumference than what is the circle. Very simple techniques. Now, ancient technology on display. Well, this as well, but what's really cool is this old crane. This is the type of thing you would have seen 2,000 years ago in Roman times. I think this might be the same one, or from a different angle, or well, it's a crane. There's a chain block here or a compound pulley, but ancient Roman crane. Treadmill, hamster wheel, which is a gearbox connected to blocks, and just the amount of mechanical advantage is huge. This is one of the reliefs commemorating the raising of an Egyptian obelisk in Rome. Tread wheel and compound pulley. I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. It's anti-gravity technology, which we, alternate, the Graham Hancock type still haven't sort of caught up with. Here's an old picture. That's I think Robert Flood. Well, it's one piece of rope, gives you a mechanical advantage if you know how to use the rope correctly. And you'll say, well, there's no pulleys back in the day. Well, yes, there were. A tree branch is a pulley. You throw it over the top. These have got axles in there which make it less friction, so more efficient. But the trick is winding the rope, a single piece of rope wound around a few times. That's where the magic happens. All of this other stuff is just adding a little bit of efficiency to it because there's less friction. So again, even where the more modern developments have come in, where we've used use of steel, this could all be, the chain can be replaced by a fibre rope, incredibly strong. The non-wood parts can be replaced by wooden parts. The corners can be, instead of being bolted together, can be lashed together with rope. But it's this fella here, compound pulley system. Like he's, before photography, this guy's drawing it, and all these people do it in real life. You can get so a modern manual chain hoist off the shelf. You can get 100-ton version of it, so you can lift 100 tons on your own without a big, powerful motor to help you along. And so these don't have bearings and axles, but these are ship blocks, and it's exactly the same thing. This piece of rope gets wound around. You have to pull the rope twice as much, 4 times as much, 8 times as much in length, but you can lift twice as much, 4 times as much, 8. It's a little bit less than that because there are other things coming in, but the basic of it, every time you create this rope loop, you're halving the weight you're halving the energy you need to, the weight doesn't change, but the energy you need to put into lifting it changes. So if you just throw a rope over a tree branch and try to lift 100 pounds, you're still going to have to put 100 pounds force on it. But if you do it properly and make a compound pulley, you don't need advanced frictionless bearings to do it. You can just drill holes in wood and make these old-fashioned ones. So lifting, it's a bit like this crane. I think I got a close-up of it, but what's same principle here. That arm extends out and you can lower the arm and then bring it up, and there's a compound pulley there, and then there's a compound pulley underneath so you can lift it up. What can you say? This is sticks and strings technology. All of this technology is based on how they used to make shipping. So as long as there was decent sized ships where the bits and pieces were too heavy for a guy just to lift by hand, sail rigging is essential. So ancient Egyptian big boats, they had to know mechanical advantage just to build them, let alone to operate them. 20, so on top in granite, might I add, on top of the rest of the granite, but they had to place these up there. Where is it? 12 minutes they raised these, it was 110 feet. No fancy modern cranes, just pulleys and levers and basic ancient principles. This is Cleopatra's Needle being transported to New York, and all the same. It's pulleys and levers, just like Wally Wellington does in his demonstration. And then there might be a steel axle here, but bronze or wood can support these weights no problem. And again, I'll say, but the wood would collapse. Well, I had to build the port is lower than the site, so they needed to lift this thing up and then get it across to the right height. If anyone tells you wood won't support these weights, it's laughable. And then as things developed, they moved away from wood, and iron mass production made these things more economical and changed the world. But it actually didn't change the world, because everything here is just a modern updated version of ancient machines. Is that a sled? Yeah. Ancient tech on display. a hoist crane. So all the bits that are doing the lifting here, if I was to, which is essentially what we see here, this crane, which is using exactly the same equipment, can't lift as much as one of these cranes because it's lifting the stone over here, but the centre of the gravity of the crane is over here, so it wants to tip over. The further you are away from the centre of gravity, the more forces there are. So hoist cranes like this, you can see modern versions in shipyards are lifting 1,000 tonnes, 2,000 tonnes. And okay, so progress moves on. Try to remember to put the link in the display. Inside that wooden casing is a 300-tonne monolith of marble, moving it on sleds. And I found that someone pointed out later, I thought they were using oil or fat, but they were using just detergent. It's even as make it slippery and move along, because the ancients were doing the same thing, lubricating the path in front, bringing the rails into the front. In Mesopotamia, Twin Rivers, they were doing the same, moving giant blocks. So they didn't have photography, but they did leave pictures. And so we have like photo and film of people doing that type of work. We have the ancients drawing them doing that type of work. Sleds are just works. And what can you say? I just don't want to know. I'm just asking questions. Don't you dare give me answers. And even little tricks. So instead of dressing up the logs, that they're imperfect logs is actually a good thing, because just like with moving that Mussolini's monolith, instead of using squared off bits like this, where there's too much surface area, whether it's the grease or the detergent, going to create a suction cup effect. But if you've got irregular logs like that, well, they slide over. It's not going to stick to it. Never lost ancient technology. Columns, it's often Brian Foster types. They didn't have lathes, and you can't, these things must look at it. It must be lathed. Well, tell that to the old time, guys who used to make columns. It's a laughable proposition. These are granite columns, Texas State Capitol building. And then, well, when lathes were economic and available, they used those as well. But the real beauty of it is the column capitals, which done by hand, beautiful work. Abandoned column. Another talking point, Hancock types is, they never left unfinished stones in the quarry. This is again absolute nonsense. Not only did they leave unfinished stones in the quarry, they left column blanks, worked stone that was considerably much more in value than was a block of stone. St. John the Divine Cathedral in New York, again, granite columns, but these were done on lathes. And you can see just giant columns. Monolith columns were used all over the time. Here's some being transported. They might be for St. John the Divine, I'm not sure. They look a little bit small to be, somewhere else. Again, you look at the US old state capitals, late 1800s, early 1900s. Other places too, of course. Before diamond tipped carbide tools were available, people were doing the work. Whetstones, so every sort of barber shop or engineering shop, farm would want to be able to sharpen their scythe or their axe or whatever, and so production of whetstones, which would usually be made of sandstone, because sandstone is harder than granite. It's not as tough as granite to work, but when you often hear the hardness, they always refer to Mohs scale. If someone says Mohs scale granite, you can't do it, you instantly know that they're clueless, because sandstone is actually harder in Mohs scale because it's got more percentage quartz, even got corundum in there. But the production of these types of things, so I don't think they're even whetstone, but just maybe column capitals. But just the old masons by hand. They were craftsmen, they were sculptors. They really knew what they were doing. So transporting, again, these giant stone would collapse under the weight of rollers. Well, it's really the axle is supporting the weight there, and and it's focused on a tiny part around the wheel. So again, if I'll tell you that the wood would collapse and wouldn't support the weight, absolute nonsense. There's little sleds there, and so that cross member is supporting all the weight, and it's fine. Rollers, sleds, so you got a sled moving across rollers, and you're really sledding it. So these are rollers, but it's really the sled doing the work. The rollers could be fixed round bits of wood sliding across, but exactly the same principle. It's about 60, 70 tonne, but again, it would collapse. Yeah, it's nonsense. And there's animals going on, but you don't need that many oxen to move. I don't think that they're hooked up, especially with the curve, in the road. But maybe they caught up to a cow herd who's moving his. But you can see, you just don't need that amount to move that type of stone. He's got a little dinky trolley, and given the size of it, that's a few tonne there as well. These guys are moving it across a mountain road, not a smooth asphalt tar road, graded, but they can do it. Here's another angle. You can see the wonky wheel. Again, the size of the business and the scale of what was big business. As traction engines come in and change things a little bit, but not that much, because they're the horsepower, manual labour. Well, these start to be more efficient because there's a lot less. Once you pay for the expensive engine to start with, then the costs that go into it and the risk, these aren't going to break a leg and be useless. Once a horse is injured, off to the knackery with him. But you can, if a piece breaks on the machine, you can repair it. It's about 50 tonnes. Even a lot bigger, this is 103 tonnes. Again, but this is on a steam train. Well, we saw already that you can move them on rollers when the trains come in. Makes for a more efficient economy. Pile all these blocks up and you have a giant monolith. So they're small separate peak, but the point is that you'll often again hear, but the ships couldn't carry the weight, how could they move these down the river? Again, barges, it's a nonsense. Big business of moving stones is another example of a business of transporting the stones around. When people made stone buildings, sculpting and carving, this rough looking thing, but in the sculptor's mind he knows what he's going to carve, and it's going to be something very beautiful. But all those sculptors used very basic tools, plumb lines, straight edges, this type of thing. They're carving out so just like this guy's using a plumb line, well, you hang a bunch of plumb lines and then you can measure the distance from them across, and then you can transfer, so you have a small sculpture, replica, a little scale model, and then you scale it up to make these big ones. They still use that now, and so you can get an idea of the size of that relief carving. So that's him there, is it? There, but ancient techniques. This is maybe in the war or maybe somewhere else, maybe another reason, but pneumatic drills had come in by that point, so it's like a tiny little jackhammer, but it works exactly the same as an old-fashioned chisel and mallet. A little bit more efficient, a little bit easier to work with, but the principle of it hasn't changed. It's a beautiful old sculpture, and pickaxes and that type of stuff, so it always begins with brute force. The old world, Paris, London, New York as well, Prague, any of those old cities, and just all these little details, including these, done by hand. When there was a time when masons and sculptors were in. It was a big trade. There were so many people for it because it was before glass and steel and modern buildings changed the labour force and what we need. And so just skill of the old days, old workshops. All these bits was produced in mass, so you couldn't just have one chiseler going at it. It was a huge trade. Still sculptors, but now again they're using a pneumatic drill. But you saw those pictures. Some people doing it with hammer and chisel, mallet and chisel. Exactly the same, just modern developments made it that little bit easier, but just the beauty and the absolute precision of these things and the old artisans. I think that's what's missing with alternative historians rushing to create they've built this narrative and then they must then looking for the evidence for it. But just look at what the old timers did. A lot of this new advanced lost technology is it was they got no clue about the modern history, let alone trying to how are they going to ever uncover anything ancient history if they don't know what happened, how different the world was 100 years ago, and then trying to put it back 12,000 years. Ridiculous. I think again, notice those stools. I think that they're to lean in and outside to side and get the right angle, because especially when they were carving in those names in memorials, that's they're going to be putting, not just if you make a mistake that whole panel is useless. It's also you want to have a bit of respect for the sacrifices. These guys died. This workshop, if you went back probably 10. Well, actually, look, the guy's still chiselling with a mallet, but other people there have got the pneumatic tools, and because these things are sort of vibrating, the really delicate work would still be and still is done by hand, but to get the rougher work and just a faster work rate, well, you do it with these mechanised tools. And, well, ancient Egypt, same tools to measure and test stone they were using back then. Carving colossal statues, how were they doing it? Well, they even got the tool. The tools we find match the tools that they show themselves being used. Carving sphinxes and other shapes, and this is carving a colossus. You can see that backing plate. So, for instance, those big statues at Karnak, when you see them from behind, you see that they've got a flat back with all this carving in there. But even more your traditional statue, mallet and chisels. Again, flint can replace iron. You could even in granite you can work copper, but you're always repairing your tools, so you'd be better off with the stone tools that they did find. Neolithic people were working even before copper or any metals come along. They were working, shaping, doing stone. And so it's this how could Stone Age people do this? Well, because they were Stone Age people, and Stone Age people know a lot more about stone than what computer age people do, which is sad, because the computer age, information age, all this info is available, but there's a pretend fascination with this, because that's, again, I'm asking questions, but you're not asking questions because you don't want answers. But anyway, shaping stone with the vases and all these things. Probably after World War I, reconstruction work, workplace safety, the old-fashioned way. Don't worry, I'm wearing a hat. Making arches, making vaulted ceilings, so floating those stone ceilings in the cathedrals, these vaulted arches, there's not like a secret chain or wire rope supporting them underneath. It's just a series of pointy arches. I forget what, not a buttressed arch, but anyway, beautiful work, arch bridges, no lintel. It's all making an old-fashioned. This is a reservoir, yeah. So a dam. And if you maybe countless in granite, in limestone, in sandstone, vineyards have this standard shape. But then people see the Barabra caves in India and they're like, how did they do? This must be advanced, lost ancient high technology. I don't care. They've come up with a conclusion and look for any evidence to confirm what they've already come to believe. It's a belief system. It's you start young, build up your skills, and again ramping it up, making the ramp. Young fellas start early, harden up, and then they get better skills. From the old mail order books, but you can get the tools, star drill. But of course, these are not precision German carbide and diamond tools. These are just the old ones. And so again, I just got this master mason going off about this, but I can't do it with diamond tools. Well, sorry, you're not a good mason then. And if you were interested in your business, you'd go do these experiments you demand of others, because apparently you've got the tools and access to the stones, and that's your job. So you go do it, buddy. I've already done my bit. So it's a mason's hammer. You get a block of dolerite or hematite. It's a hammer. It's a wedge. You get sharp bits of flint, chert. You got picks or chisels. If you had the choice, you wouldn't even choose these. You'd go for the carbide tip modern versions. Let's have some tools like limestone, so Bedford stone. I'm pretty sure that's like granite, but then sandstone tools as well, where they're for marble. And this is Vigeland Sculpture Park. A lot of the sculptures have got a lot of sort of nudity and stuff like that, but if you want to see, this was done around about 1940, so even if I was using pneumatic tools, it's the thing is the skill of the artist. And this single piece of granite, 121 sculptures around us. Each sculpture there on its own would be a piece of art on its own, but this one piece, 121 figures. 14 years and 3 other stone carvers, but they're also doing these other groups as well, so it wasn't just 14 years on that. And this is in the complexity, the curves, the gaps, the corners, the inner corners and stuff in granite. So with that, Jesus wanted to go through these old pics, and it was just timely because again I've got one of these. I can prove that these sites are far more older, and you can't do it with those. I've got diamond tools, and I couldn't do it. And that type of stuff. And so we got the photos, and the ancients themselves depicted it. They left the tools behind. The tools work, and when it comes to the scale. Well, okay, here's the scale. Well, we used to have a lot of people trained in that business. So could we do it now? Well, there'd be a drag in between the few remaining artisans teaching whole new groups. So if you want to do it by hand, you need that big labour force. And a short time ago, those big labour forces did exist, but the world's changed. It'd be like vacuum tubes. There was a lot of people who specialised in vacuum tubes, but now it's all silicon chips and stuff. So Anyway, they cut, they chiseled, they polished, they did all these things, did it in a huge scale. You can see it, in the cities and the towns and the buildings and bridges and roads and everything across the globe. And cool old stuff. But of course, okay, this is all CGI. It's a mystery. This can't be explained. There once was a cataclysm, something Göbekli Tepe, ancient civilization. Look, here's a picture of someone holding a snake in the Middle East, and here's an ancient picture of someone holding a snake in Far East Asia. Here's a picture of someone holding a snake in South America. Therefore, everything else is wrong because I've got a couple of people holding pictures of snakes. Yeah, so this is all fake. All about, yeah. Anyway, SGD, cheers, have a good one.